My mother-in-law borrowed my credit card and went on a week-long vacation with my sister-in-law. By the time they returned, I'd moved out. It was a family gathering. I, 38F, and my husband, 38M, brought toys for all the kids in the family, and that's when my sister-in-law, 33F, mockingly accused me of doing some shady, illegal stuff at the bank to afford all this. I felt a lump in my throat because everyone was listening in shock. It hurt me and my husband, but we let it slide, brushing it off as her usual jealousy. We didn't want to cause a scene, especially when the other family members were here. But as we tried to walk away, she continued. She said it was true, and my husband Dave had told her all that. I controlled my anger and asked her to stop because she was being hurtful and insensitive. I've worked hard for my company. She scoffed by saying, then why won't he stop whining about how he hates your job? My husband told her that he always knew that she was a bitter, jealous person, but that this was a new low and he's tired of it. She started crying because she hated that people always told her that she was jealous. However, a few family members who heard her, including my father-in-law, suggested that my sister apologize because she made an inappropriate comment. But then my mother-in-law, 62F, swooped in and claimed that my sister-in-law was just kidding. She played down her remark and said that my sister is happy for both of us and that we're doing great financially. Here's a bit of background. My sister-in-law and her husband temporarily live at my in-laws' house until her husband finds a better job. He works in a small bakery. I work at a bank, and my husband used to be in the military. He has one sister and 2 brothers. We have now been married for almost 14 years and have 2 beautiful boys. I make good money and had rented my current 3-bedroom house, the smart choice considering we live in an extremely expensive city in the US, before I started dating my husband. He moved in with me within a year, and we've been having a very good and happy relationship. We're in a stable financial position. I've worked hard and managed our finances well. I use my banking skills, allowing us to have a comfortable life. Every year we plan a short international trip, and we've even invested enough to secure our future together. I and my husband know for a fact that my sister hates it when people tell her that she's jealous, especially of me. But we were very hurt and embarrassed. Maybe my anger was towards the wrong person because it should have been towards my dear mother-in-law who always says something to sister-in-law that causes problems. Sister-in-law is a stay-at-home mum, just like mother-in-law, and she's very much in her pocket. Mother-in-law is sister-in-law's number 1 enabler, and vice versa. Listening to my mother-in-law, she came to stay with us once. She's having marriage problems and needs some space away from her husband while they sort things out. We have a nice guest room, and I had no problem with her staying. She asked me a lot of questions about my job, which I explained to her in detail. My husband and I had assumed that she was thinking of entering the workforce now that she's not on good terms with her husband. But nope, it was just to gain information from us, using which she could embarrass us at the family gathering. My husband and I have tried to have conversations with her, but we needed a bit of distance, but nothing time couldn't fix. Many further phone conversations took place, which were mostly sister-in-law yelling and picking at every move we made, as if it were an attack against her. So we figured we'd keep more distance until she cools down. She manipulated the situation and reported to brother-in-law, father-in-law, and mother-in-law that we were singling her out and basically saying that I was coming between her and my husband, which is a bald-faced lie because until this point she'd never really cared to call my husband. She'd manipulated father-in-law to believe that I was coming between them to the point where father-in-law was giving me a hard time and I was in his bad books. I used to have a great relationship with him, but now my husband and I have refused to discuss our side of this out of respect for sister-in-law. He never confronted me for me to say anything, so I didn't want to act as if I were the victim. Please take my side. So on to the actual event that brought me here. A few days ago, my mother-in-law called me asking for a favour. She wanted me to fund her and my sister's vacation, promising to pay me back once they got the money from their husbands next month. She wants me to pay for her ticket and accommodation. They'll ask their husbands to pay for food and activities. I asked, Sophia? Mother-in-law then proceeded to guilt-trip me with the whole, sister-in-law deserves a vacation just like everyone else. But the fact is that sister-in-law's entire life has only ever been one giant vacation and she doesn't need a break from anything. This, of course, didn't work. Why should I be the one who bears the expenses of her trip, especially for someone who's continuously caused me problems? I'm sure brother-in-law is unaware she's doing this, as he knows our feelings on the matter and doesn't dispute them. This seemed like manipulation to me, so I politely declined, suggesting that they should ask their husbands directly. I explained that my husband and I were planning to buy a new car because ours was very old and falling apart. I did offer to give them shopping money if they needed it, just for formality. A week later, my mother-in-law came over to my place, subtly hinting at the shopping trip I'd mentioned. When I said I didn't have cash, she asked for my credit card. I hesitantly asked how much she needed. She said, with a reassuring smile, that she didn't know, but she wouldn't go overboard and that she needed it just for some minor purchases, nothing too expensive. I told her that I would discuss it with my husband and then call her, but she reassured me and then left with my card. As soon as she left, I put a $1,000 limit on her because she has a long history of not being great with money. She said she's unable to get further credit in her name due to this. I and my brother lent her $1,600 each last year as she wanted to clear debt to avoid paying huge interest on payday loans. Later that night, I checked my phone and saw that my card was almost maxed out. I was shocked. I then informed my husband about this. He told me that about a week before this, his mother asked him to borrow $200 because she ran out of money. He reluctantly drove over to her house to give her the money. They got into a heated argument because he told her he would not be supporting her financially anymore, and that would be the last time he was lending her money. She yells at him that he's supposed to support her financially because she's his mum. He told her that he didn't have money to give her. Previously, whenever he said he didn't have any money, she'd quietly drop the subject, but this time she replied, "Yes, you do." Long story short, she somehow found out that we have a lot of money saved up in our banks. He did, however, say that he's already written off the $200 he let her borrow. I personally don't feel like he should because that's enabling her, but he doesn't want to pick a fight over $200. I can't help but feel stressed because I've tried so hard to hide how much money we've saved from her. It just makes me anxious that she's going to use this against us or try to guilt-trip my husband into giving her money. Before I came along, he pretty much bought her expensive gifts whenever she asked and would give her money here and there whenever she ran out. We both worked so hard over the years to save all this money to be used as a down payment for a house in the near future, and she knows this. Not only that, we're preparing for a third baby, and that in itself is expensive. I'm just so angry that a mother could ask her son for money when he's out of the military now and preparing for a baby. I don't understand how she thinks that that's acceptable. That $200 in cash is $200 she would be taking away from her grandchild, but she doesn't seem to care. I think her idea that her son is supposed to take care of her is why she overspends and she has no money saved. I mean, absolutely nothing, not even for retirement. Also, it seems like since she couldn't get the money from her son, she's now turned to her daughter-in-law. Now I regret giving her my card. My husband checked the details. The card was swiped once at the airport. We were naturally upset since we worked so hard to pay off all her previous balances on the card, and now she wants to spend my money lavishly. I tried calling her, but she turned off her phone and didn't answer my calls or texts for about 7 hours. Around 11:30 p.m. that night, she returned texts, very brief, and said, "I just needed some mother-daughter bonding time." I immediately called my mother-in-law to ask where she was. After arguing back and forth about it, the truth ended up being that my mother-in-law did not go shopping. She casually said, "Oh, I'm simply on vacation with Isabel in Nevada. We'll be back in 2 days." 2 days? I was furious. They'd used my credit card without permission for their trip. I then blocked my card and talked with my friend, who was a lawyer, and had them draft a claim for small claims court. Now here's where it gets funny. I get a message that a charge of $300 was declined because there wasn't enough credit left on the card. I then got a text from my mother-in-law saying that the card wasn't working and that they'd spent the little cash they had on some purchases. They were both stranded at their vacation spot with no hotel to stay at and no money left. When I didn't reply, they called me, asking me to pay for their plane tickets to get home. I was taken aback. I asked why I should pay, and my mother-in-law said because they ran out of money and didn't put any aside to get home. I refused, and I told her it wasn't my problem. They didn't save money for the return flight. Sister-in-law started arguing with me, saying that I couldn't let them be stranded in another city when I had the means to help, especially after I refused to help to fund the vacation. I said no, and that they needed to deal with it on their own. They tried calling me multiple times, but I turned off my phone. They didn't stop texting me, trying to get me to pay. Then my husband told me they'd contacted their own husbands and some other family members for help, but no one was willing to help them out. They had to eventually return by road, and it took them 8+ hours. When they finally returned, they came straight to my place, only to find out from my neighbour that I'd moved to a new apartment. I knew that they would keep coming to us for financial help, so we found another apartment in the same city. My husband had supported my decision to protect our finances and our trust. As soon as my neighbour called me to inform me about this, I and my husband arrived at my in-laws' house. My father-in-law and brother-in-law let us know that they read the credit card fraud report and are very angry and upset with what they've done. Now, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law reached home with their tourist bags, and she brought us flowers, fruit baskets, and cookies. I stormed and demanded the card. Not exactly the same words as this happened a while ago, but this is mostly how it went down. Me: give me the card now. Mother-in-law: what card are you talking about? Me: the one for which you lied to me and planned to spend thousands. Mother-in-law: oh, your credit card. I was going to wait until I unpacked my stuff. Me: give it now. I had a plan. I did a voice record of everything. I gave her a disclaimer that I was saving a copy of the conversation. She responded with, whatever. She handed over the card grudgingly and asked my husband why we'd moved to a new apartment, as if nothing had happened. He told her that it was none of her business. She told me that I was brainwashing her son and that I could not keep him from her. After 14 years of them sticking their noses where it doesn't belong, especially regarding our 2 children, I've chosen to stand up for myself. My mother-in-law has overstepped her boundaries too many times, and no one in the family will confront her because they're too afraid of her. Well, I'm not. I calmly told her that he chose to cut her off and that he needed to separate himself to focus on finding a job so that he could provide for his family, our pets, and myself. She scoffed at that. He told her she shouldn't have lied about the card. She was sarcastic and followed up with, so what, are you going to have me arrested? My father-in-law then told my mother-in-law and sister-in-law that I had filed a case against them at the small claims court, and now they have to deal with it and pay all the money back. She seemed so shocked. Naturally, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law tried to shift the blame onto me, but that's when my father-in-law snapped. He told them that they had to repay me for what they'd stolen. Mother-in-law admitted she took a few hundred for a small vacation. She didn't even apologize and still tried to defend what she did, saying it was only $955 and it would be paid off soon. Just lying to me about the card was a huge betrayal of trust. Using that card on vacation was even worse. But then using it to love bomb us after her ridiculous and appalling behaviour, then those ridiculous excuses. I told her that the gifts were all very nice and thoughtful, but they were not necessary and that they didn't absolve her of any wrongdoing. She again started screeching about me messing with her family. I told her I was done. I had the conversation recorded and I was giving her a couple of months to pay us. She then blew up, saying that I let them be stranded in another city and refused to help, although I had money to pay for their plane tickets. She said that by forcing them to travel by road, I'd caused her daughter unnecessarily much exhaustion. She says she's shocked by the way I behaved in this situation and the lack of empathy I displayed. She called me every name under the sun and said that I had no empathy for her and her daughter and that I'd tainted the memories of this vacation. What kind of woman would rant about an 8-hour road trip? That's part of the trip. Hanging out together and talking is way better than flying. She hasn't yet fully admitted how much they were planning to spend if the card hadn't been blocked. She's also guilting my husband, texting him things like, I can't believe you'd accuse your own mother of this, even though she's already admitted guilt. Today, she asked if she was even his mother anymore. My husband's response was, I can't believe you would steal from your own son and daughter-in-law, and I don't know, do you even want to be my mother anymore? If so, you can prove that you do by taking responsibility for your own actions. I feel stupid and used right now. It's not the credit card that's the issue, it's the breach of trust and the fact that they hid it from me, a major problem in my book. There was no apology and there was no change in my mother-in-law's behaviour, so thanks for the chocolate-covered strawberries, but they changed nothing. The final straw happened yesterday, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law absolutely refused to even acknowledge how I or my husband feel about them misusing the card. We're hurt and feel disrespected. They won't even have an adult discussion about it. We tried yesterday, but his mum literally said, I'm not talking about this, and walked away. She just wants us to act like it didn't happen. I'm so sick of doing that. That's what they always do. They treat me like crap, act like it never happened, and bully me into submission. Am I the only one furious about this? To the extent of changing apartments? I hate this woman, and I don't want her to be part of my life after all of this. Am I being reasonable? I'd never keep him from visiting her, I just don't want to be a part of it. She's also spent the last 2 days concerned that she'll end up in prison. I'm just really struggling because my family told me it's not worth it, so basically I don't know where to go from here. Update 1. Apparently my post made the front page on social media. This is my second post on this site. This is an incredibly generous community that does give weight to big issues facing normal people, I just wanted to say thank you sincerely to each and every one of you who's taken time out of your day to put forth your thoughts. I need to mention something. As several people have been asking about it, my husband is unemployed, which is why he initially refused to give her $200. Although it wasn't a huge amount, I'm the one working. Money is tight, and yes, paying for the vacation would have struck me financially, since I'm paying for everything. Also, the price tag for mother-in-law's spending is way too high, I know this for sure. My husband and I can comfortably afford our family, but adding a mother-in-law or sister-in-law would put financial pressure on us. Now for the update. My mother-in-law found our new house address. She more than likely found it from father-in-law. We never directly said, don't tell mother-in-law or sister-in-law, which was our mistake, but we were too busy with our younger son and getting him settled in to consider mother-in-law or sister-in-law at the time. A couple of days ago, my mother-in-law came over to our apartment and told my husband, "Did you pay off the money yet? Be careful with the interest amount." I had to get in front of him and tell her to leave before she got hurt. I've never seen him so angry in my life. She screamed at both of us and took a lot of it out on me. She told me I didn't belong in the conversation. I didn't say a word, because A, I had been his life partner for 14 years, and B, the card was mine. All I said in that conversation was that I was done listening, and then I walked away to my car because she was screaming and standing up in a threatening way. They continued their conversation, and I returned home after a few hours. My husband is a great guy and knows where to draw the line. I'm glad that he calls his mum out for her unruly behaviour. However, he mentioned in private that we should maybe drop the case because it is his mother's. My brother-in-law and father-in-law just want to settle this down. They're not taking sides. We're not going to court at this moment. I wanted to, but my husband suddenly said he was not ready for that. He will keep his distance and not talk to her, but he's feeling immense guilt for all of this. Apparently, mother-in-law is paying $250 a month back to my husband to clear the balance, which I don't believe. I asked my husband to show me my mother-in-law paying the $250 a month, which he refused. He just let me know that sister-in-law had to take a job and work double shifts to pay some of the amount to mother-in-law, and the rest mother-in-law pays. If I let my mother-in-law get away with fraud, then I am in for a long, rough ride. No one wants to file a lawsuit against his mum, but she's committed fraud. She's already walked all over me, and if there's no consequence, she will keep doing it. The worst thing is that my husband understands all of my concerns, agrees with them, and wants to drop the suit anyway. He doesn't think this will ever happen again, but it's better to be safe than sorry. There was a lot of arguing back and forth, but eventually I gave in. Why? I guess I felt sorry for my mother-in-law after listening to what my husband told me. She was a poor, teen, single mum when she had her first kid, so she experienced the hardships you'd expect. She's never been anywhere. She's never even left the state with the exception of Hawaii because we had our destination wedding there. My family paid for her to be able to attend. The more important reason was that dropping the case meant a lot to my husband. He grew up without a lot and came so far in his life, and I knew it would mean a lot to him to be able to do this, not just for mother-in-law but for himself. So we decided against filing charges and instead hired a lawyer. The lawyer wrote up some lawyer stuff I don't understand, which basically stated that they had until a certain date to pay off the debt, plus the fees for our lawyer. They agreed to it, probably because they didn't want to go to prison and thought that they could still salvage a relationship with my husband. We're hoping for at least a small amount back, even if it means tiny payments over time, but I'm definitely going to call the credit card company soon and explain it to them. Start with that honest backstory and see what they can do to help me. Perhaps transferring the debt to my mother-in-law or forgiving it altogether since it was ill-gotten and approved under false pretenses. Update 2. My mother-in-law is the most entitled, choosing beggar I've ever known. We just found out that my mother-in-law has been paying for unnecessary things with a card she took out 4 years ago by committing identity fraud using my husband's personal information. My husband has cancelled the card now. It has hundreds of dollars on it. It has a $10,000 limit, and about a third was used until last year. She was still using it as a daily swipe until the card was almost maxed out 2 months ago. We were both blown away by this. I called my mother-in-law immediately. She asked why I was really calling because she could tell that this was not to apologise. I didn't acknowledge this or accept her. I flat out asked her about her son's credit card. She froze, then sputtered out 4 million excuses. "Dave, let me." No, he never okayed this. But he said, "Mum, if you ever need help, I'm here for you," which was when he served in the military. As a result, you opened a card in his name? She went on to tell me that it was mostly for emergencies, but with money tight recently, she had used it quite a bit. I probably shouldn't have talked to her at all because at that point my husband was fuming, but we really felt like we needed answers to what was going on. We wanted to know exactly how she spent the money that wasn't hers to spend. He asked the credit card company for all the statements they could provide. We read them. There were payments for dinners out, mani-pedis, Starbucks outings, etc. These don't count as emergencies in my book. My husband has agreed to sue her now. We discussed if we were going to pay the debt off in full to hopefully get some interest and the late fees taken off, and hopefully that will help. My father-in-law too suggested we make a payment in full, which would suck for our savings really badly, but it's better than getting more interest. I don't want to make the huge mistake of paying off that debt. By paying it off, my husband is taking responsibility for it in the eyes of the credit card company and possibly the law. Paying it off himself is basically him saying, yes, this is my debt to pay. My mother-in-law might use that to weasel out of the credit fraud charge by saying that him paying it off gave her permission after the fact. The way I see this, in as black and white as it comes, is credit card debt was paid in full by card owner and the account was closed. Done. No case. So we won't do that. My husband's other siblings better check their credits ASAP. We're meeting with his brothers this weekend to go over everything and get them to check that my mother-in-law hasn't got the same in their name. I think it will be very eye-opening for them. I don't know what else to type because I'm literally flawed. I have no idea what to do, think, say, or anything else. I feel so lost and like I need so much help. Update 3. We did some digging and boy were we astonished. His mum and dad have over 3 cars, all in father-in-law's name, and recently mortgaged a $300,000 home. I was sick to my stomach to find that out because my father has always established that he's financially weak. Mother-in-law obviously lied about not having good credit or the financial means to pay off their old debts. And I don't believe all the purchases made on my husband's credit card are for my mother. I'm sure her husband has been spending too. We met with a few attorneys aside from my friend, police detectives and private investigators. They all pretty much said the same thing, i.e. my husband has everything he needs to pursue legal action against his mother. The attorneys were all sincere in their advice and told us that the number one objective was to file a police report against her because a credit card company is not going to be able to do anything about a sob story unless we had certifiable proof that it was fraud. The vacation trip issue would have been a civil case, but definitely small claims territory. However, by opening a card in my husband's name, she's made the biggest mistake of her life because it's criminal. Initially, going down the fraud path seemed ruled out, because getting my mother-in-law in legal trouble was going to be painful for my husband and expensive in other ways. And there was some degree of consent from the cardholder anyway. So my lawyer friend has warned me that there was really no short-term objective of obtaining a judgment and accruing lawyer fees if we could not prove it with just the voice recording. But now my mother-in-law is caught in an even stronger case, which is going to be filed by her very own son. This is obviously not over. My husband's brothers and some of his relatives are willing to fight for us. So that's where we stand today. Thank you again to the hundreds who shared their thoughts and ideas. Update 4. If you check my post history, you'll see that I had a serious issue with my mother-in-law and her stealing my husband's identity about 6 months ago. A lot has happened since then, and I felt like those of you who helped me out deserved an update. My husband and I went to the police station and filed a police report. It was honestly just awful. The police officer kept trying to talk us out of it and saying that if we did it, his mother would be going to prison. This isn't a direct quote, but he said something like, "This isn't just a tool to get stuff off your record. This will put criminal charges against her." My husband and I kind of just looked at each other, but in the end he went through with it. My husband then reported the fraud to the credit card company using the police report, and they wiped the debt from the credit report. They sent him an affidavit to sign. They asked him if he'd filed a police report yet. He told them yes, and they said that if he wanted to press charges, it was his decision. I just didn't know if Discover themselves could press charges. Now they've gone after my mother-in-law, and my husband is in the clear. They've charged her with a felony and will probably send her to prison if she's convicted. It was deleted from our report, that's all we cared about. I'm sure they will try and say that my husband knew about the accounts and that he gave them permission, and I'm starting to worry that people will listen to them. We discovered the charges, and a lot of them were things that were gifts to my husband, along with bills and other spending. I'm worried because my husband benefited from the fraud because his parents bought things for him with it. One of the charges was for tyres for the car that they gifted to him. He dropped the car off at the dealer and picked it up. His mum went in to pay, but he was the one who dropped it off. My husband now made the decision that he no longer wanted a relationship with his parents, which I supported wholeheartedly. Our decision was to never see or speak to his family again, but when my husband's niece died, their granddaughter, we felt as though we should at least go to the funeral. We saw them then. His parents said that they have the money, that they're going to pay back all of the accounts, which makes me wonder why they needed the cards in the first place, and that if we go through with the charges, they are going to go to prison. I don't even know if we could retract the police report if we wanted to. My husband told them to drop it, because it wasn't happening. It's been a week since the initial conversation, and my mother-in-law is still trying her damnedest. We've stopped answering her calls and aren't responding to her texts. We're going 100% without contact with them and letting the law deal with it now. Our lawyer suggested sending a formal cease and desist letter, formal documentation that we want her to stop contacting us in any way, sending us things, calling, etc. I have a feeling that we also need to lay the groundwork for future restraining orders. I know that this identity theft case is going to be a horrible stressor in our lives. We intend to take a private, secret vacation with my extra time off next month. Any ideas where we should go for a tropical vacation that won't fry my pale skin off? So, what do we think about this story? OP's mother-in-law sounds like a nightmare. I can't believe she stole all that money from her daughter-in-law, obviously never intending to pay it back. Do you think OP and her husband were right to sue the mother and father-in-law? Or should they have tried harder to settle outside of court? It's a shame the post ended without a final resolution. What do you think happened in the end? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and see you again next time.